There's a very interesting narrative this week amongst popular figureheads such as Biden, Newsom, Zuckerberg, and interestingly, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. What do you think they all share in common this week? Mark Zuckerberg's announcement this week that his companies will be dropping fact-checking in place of community notes has actually set off a bit of a chain reaction of outrage. We're going to be looking at Biden raging over this.
I don't know what that's all about.
Meghan Markle and Prince Harry criticizing this. And we're going to try and figure out why they're so upset. Parallel to that, we've seen a slowly creeping, somewhat forced attempt at taking back control from notable leftist politicians such as Gavin Newsom, AOC, and Bernie Sanders. We're going to discuss what they're doing and if we think it's working. So let's first take a look at Biden ripping into Mark Zuckerberg's decision to remove fact-checking.
Let's take a listen.
Of walking away from fact-checking as well as not reporting anything having to do with discrimination regarding TPS. I find to be...
There's something about the way that he talks where it doesn't sound like he fully comprehends what he's reading.
Just contrary to American justice, the way we talk about one another. Telling the truth matters. I mean, I know I'm on national television, but you all are local reporters and national reporters. I'm not, this is not a legit, real question, but what do you think? You think it doesn't matter that they let be printed where millions of people read it, things that are simply not true? I mean, I don't know what that's all about. It's just completely contrary to everything America's about. We want to tell the truth.
I think what he really means is we want to tell my version of the truth. That has been shown by even just Mark Zuckerberg talking this week with Joe Rogan about his experiences. And look, I know people are very skeptical of his agenda. We have, people pointing out how often he brings up the word trust during his podcast.
Got to a point where it's just, okay, this is destroying so much trust, not just the US, but like a very broad decrease in trust.
And then drawing a parallel with the World Economic Forum meeting last year in 2024, which Mark Zuckerberg attended. And the whole thing was based around rebuilding trust with the public.
World leaders, corporate giants, top academics, they're all coming together in Davos, Switzerland today. And security is very tight at the Swiss ski resort as those international elites begin to arrive.
The biggest risk we face is that we lose hope and that we lose trust into our institutions and particularly trust in our capability to shape a better future.
That whole question about trust, eroding trust, hence the theme of the summit this year.
Yeah, that's a huge theme, and it comes in four main branches as far as how to try to rebuild trust.
There definitely appears to be a consciousness amongst these people who are in great positions of power that they need to rebuild trust.
We haven't always done it as a nation. We want to tell the truth. And the idea that, a billionaire can buy something and say, by the way, from this point on, we're not gonna fact check anything.
Okay, so he understands. He does actually understand what's happening.
And when you have millions of people going online, reading this stuff, it is, anyway, I think it's really shameful.
But we all know the problem with fact checkers. If you're human, you're going to end up being biased in some way. And so even fact checkers will be biased. Of course, the irony of all this is that in the same week, Mark Zuckerberg is on the Joe Rogan podcast and he's describing the Biden administration doing this kind of stuff.
Jim Jordan and the House had this whole investigation and committee into the kind of government censorship around stuff like this. And we produced all these documents and it's all in the public domain. I mean, basically, these people from the Biden administration would call up our team and like scream at them and curse. And it's like these documents it's all kind of out there.
Did you record any of those phone calls?
I don't think we but I think
I want to listen.
I mean, there are emails. the emails are published. It's all kind of out there. And basically, it just got to this point where we were like, no, we're not gonna take down things that are true. That's ridiculous. They wanted us to take down this meme of Leonardo DiCaprio looking at a TV talking about how 10 years from now or something, you're going to see an ad that says, okay, if you took a COVID vaccine, you're eligible for, for this kind of payment, like this sort of like class action lawsuit type meme. And they're like, no, you have to take that down. Biden, when he gave some statement at some point, I don't know if it was a press conference or to some journalists, where he basically was like, these guys are killing you.
What's your message to platforms like Facebook?
They're killing people. I mean, it really, look, the only pandemic we have is among the unvaccinated. And they're killing people.
I don't know. Then like all these different agencies and branches of government basically just like started investigating and coming after our company. It was brutal. It was brutal.
And of course, I probably don't need to tell you this, but I don't know if we can really rely on Biden's opinion on these things. We have him also saying this week his opinion on whether or not he could have won the election. Have a look at this.
Mr. President, do you regret your decision to run for re-election? Do you think that made it easier for your predecessor to now become your successor?
I don't think so. I think I would have beaten Trump, could have beaten Trump, and I think that Kamala could have beaten Trump, would have beaten Trump. It wasn't about, I thought it was important to unify the party.
I mean, what does he mean? What does he mean by, I think that Kamala could have beaten Trump also? Because, like, she didn't. Someone says in the comments, quote unquote, so why did she lose? Would be the follow-up question I'd love to hear him try to answer. I always just get the impression from him that he doesn't fully understand the questions that he's asked. Someone wrote, Joe thinks he votes next week. Oh my God, these are merciless. Someone please tell Biden it is 2025 and not 2016. I suppose Biden at least has an excuse for his odd opinions, because we do know that he's had like mental decline. Whereas with Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, I don't know. They don't have an excuse. Let's have a look at what they've had to say. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have made it clear they aren't impressed with Meta's recent decision when it comes to its fact-checking program. They made their disapproval known via a post on their official website. Harry and Meghan stated that the move will undermine free speech and is deeply concerning to us all. Contrary to the company's talking points, allowing more abuse and normalizing hate speech serves to silence speech and expression, not foster it. In an already confusing and in many instances intentionally disruptive information environment, Meta has shown their words and commitments have very little meaning or integrity. As they announce these changes undoubtedly responding to political wins, they once again abandon public safety in favour of profit, chaos and control. Obviously, many people agree that the political timing of this is coincidental at best. There's no doubt in my mind that Mark Zuckerberg and any other very big tech guy, CEO, business owner, whatever, anyone very, very successful is most likely interested in the success of their business and putting that first. My stance on this, though, is I look at the results and I'm happy with the results. I'm aware that Mark Zuckerberg is going to do what is good for Meta and beneficial for Meta, but it also happens to align with what I believe is good for the public. And so I'm happy with it. And with free speech does come the possibility of seeing hate speech, of seeing things that you don't necessarily like or that you find offensive. That is the price that you pay for freedom. It's the price you pay for the right for your own voice to be allowed to speak. There are many, many things in this life where none of us really we don't have an objective truth. And what I believe in and what I believe to be offensive, not offensive, true, false, right, wrong, is different from what the next person believes and the next person and the next person. And so there are many situations where there just is no objective truth. If we allow for someone to decide what that truth is, we lose something deeply, deeply important. And actually, as they said in the podcast, it was becoming dystopian. That is far, far scarier than anything else that could come from giving people the freedom to share their thoughts. Many use the platform to spread joy, build community, and share empowering information. Unfortunately, Meta's recent decisions go directly against its stated mission to build human connection and instead prioritize those using the platforms to spread hate, lies, and division at the expense of everyone else. Where do they get the impression that they're prioritizing hate, lies, and division? Isn't it interesting that we've reached a place where giving people the freedom to talk without censorship and without too much meddling, that has become perceived as prioritizing hate, lies, and division? You have elites saying, we should be deciding the narrative. We should be deciding what is hate speech, what is right to say, what is okay to say. People must be controlled. People can't be trusted. And I guess that's the thing. If you want to rebuild trust, as seems to be a trend at the moment, trust is a two-way street. The post comes after Markle recently relaunched her new Instagram account. All of her posts have had the comments disabled. And again, it's just showing this theme of controlling the narrative, a constant need to control the narrative. Meta's decision to do away with their fact-checking program comes after boss Mark Zuckerberg said that the move was about restoring free expression on its platforms and reducing mistakes it said automated content moderation systems were making. Meta believes that this was resulting in censorship due to some fact-checkers being influenced by their own biases. And some of those fact-checking situations were actually comical. They were hilarious. The RFK Jr. one, I always think of it. The Fruit Loops, so funny. Let's bring it up because it's hilarious. New York Times dragged for a hilariously botched fact check of RFK Jr.'s war on artificial ingredients. The New York Times gotcha is about as sharp as a soggy bowl of breakfast cereal. The Times was relentlessly mocked over the weekend for appearing to unintentionally make RFK Jr.'s case in a recent article that tried to poke holes in his anti-processed food crusade. Kennedy President-elect Donald Trump's pick to lead the Department of Health and Human Services has long pushed for purging artificial ingredients from the food supply, routinely calling such additives poison. So here's the fact check. Mr. Kennedy has singled out Fruit Loops as an example of a product with too many artificial ingredients, questioning why the Canadian version has fewer than the US version. But he was wrong. The ingredient list is roughly the same. Although Canada's has natural colourings made from blueberries and carrots, while the US product contains red dye 40, yellow 5 and blue 1, as well as butylated hydroxytoluene or BHT, a lab-made chemical that is used for freshness, according to the ingredient label. So there, gotcha. Proved you wrong. Thank God for fact checkers, right? Saving us from that kind of misinformation. I love it. I'll never forget that one. The other thing we've got going on, talking about trust and building trust. In the last couple of days, we've also had Gavin Newsom doing a podcast. Whilst LA fires continue, he thought that was a good time to sit down and do a podcast. I want to give you some context on this one because when Trump won the election, the left was blindsided by this and they kind of scampered to figure out where they'd gone wrong. And one of the failings that they pinpointed and kind of locked in on was podcasts. Kamala Harris was kind of above the Joe Rogan podcast at the time, not really understanding that this is somebody who has tens of millions of views per episode. He tried to be very, very flexible with her, and she basically just passed on it. And then it was really funny because they kind of realized afterwards, once Trump won, that actually might have been quite important. And then there was that like really comical moment of that reporter in Australia saying, how do we recreate what the Joe Rogan podcast, like how do we recreate something like so influential as that? I can't remember who said it, but somebody came out and said the left needs its own version of Joe Rogan. It's just so tone deaf. Like, Joe Rogan was on the left. They had him.
I'm sure they're scrambling to try to create their own version of this show. Right. This is one thing that keeps coming up. Like, we need our own Joe Rogan.
Right.
But they had me.
Well, number one, they had you.
They alienated him just like they alienated so many other prominent people. And also they alienated so many people in the public. So it was just so unbelievably tone deaf. And it's just this lack of understanding of this entire culture that exists online that for some reason, like these figures on the far left just don't seem to understand at all. At the time we saw all these questions happening, and then AOC posted asking something about what podcasts do people listen to, and basically doing her research into the podcasts to try to understand them. You had Bernie Sanders and AOC releasing their own podcast, kind of long form interview. It's just a funny thing to me because it's like they're approaching it kind of like so scientifically, having to research it and experiment with it and try to understand it, because it just doesn't come naturally to them to understand this very kind of organic human thing that exists online. And they have to almost just study it like as though, you know, like they're doing a school report or something. It's a funny thing. But that shows the lack of kind of nuanced understanding shows in this week, where you see Gavin Newsom going on and doing a podcast whilst LA continues to burn. He thought that was a good time. But I suppose my fear in it is that the more that they kind of analyze it, they'll figure out how to come across as more authentic again, and they'll figure out, you know, the nuts and bolts of it all and figure out how to present themselves better over time. I fell for that years ago. I fell for the way that the left portrayed themselves so cleanly. They present something that sounds nice, and so you don't think to look too far into what they're actually doing behind the words. And I suppose because I feel like I was duped, I don't like to see them try to yield back some power and influence for the wrong reasons at the heart of it all. I would love to hear what you guys think about that. How do you feel it's going to go in terms of them venturing into these long form interviews and podcasts? Do you think that they'll be able to convince people of what they're trying to say? Do you think they'll be able to win people over? And do you think they'll be able to gain the kind of trust they're trying to gain from people and the influence that they're trying to achieve in that? Long term, how do you see that playing out? I'm looking forward to hearing your guys' thoughts. As I always say, your opinion really matters, and I really appreciate you guys sharing your thoughts. So thank you, and I'll see you guys next time.